One of the most common misconceptions is that smaller class sizes and lower scholar to teacher ratios lead to better academic outcomes. In theory, it should. Unfortunately, in practice, pun intended, it doesn't always. In fact, I would rather have a master educator working with a class of 50 scholars than have 5 novice educators working with 10 scholars each. Here's why. If we reduce the class size or the scholar to teacher ratio and we don't teach any differently, we actually won't get a different outcome. For example, if an educator lectures a group of 30 scholars and then let's say the class size is cut in half and the educator approaches the 15 scholars with the same delivery style, a lecture, all other things being equal on average, the scholars in the smaller group will have nearly identical performance to the scholars in the larger class. The same is true with adding additional bodies in the classroom. If we have 2 or 3 educators instead of 1, and the 3 educators decide that they will take turns with one of them teaching and the other 2 taking a break, all other things being equal, there will be no change in scholars' academic performance. Don't get me wrong, you can make a case for helping prevent teacher burnout, load managing, and the potentially positive effects of giving teachers a break. I'm strictly talking about influencing a scholar's academic performance. We can actually extrapolate the break to include any task that an additional set of hands in the classroom focuses on non-academic tasks. Those include things like tidying up the classroom, grading papers or exit tickets, putting things up on the bulletin board, walking scholars to the restroom, etc. Now, I'm not saying those things aren't helpful or that we shouldn't think of them as things that could enhance the culture of the classroom. We know classroom culture does influence performance, but I am saying that they could be done outside of class time. When you're in a classroom as a lead educator or the supporting educator, you want to constantly be thinking about how the presence of an additional adult or smaller class size is going to further personalize instruction. The key word being personalize. The better we understand the scholars in the classroom, their learning preferences, and what excites them, the better they will be able to perform academically. The most obvious way to support in a classroom with an additional pair of hands is to split instruction. That means creating a group that might need instruction in a different language or tailored to them at a different level or pace. The groups can be split evenly or not at all, with the more experienced educator working with the scholar or scholars who have the greatest need, and the less experienced or less familiar educator working with the scholars who are performing on or above grade level. But in our experience, there are some less obvious ways can have a big impact. We're going to cover 3 of the ways you can have a big impact without leading instruction. The first one is applying minimally invasive correction techniques during the lesson. Just because you're not leading instruction does not mean you cannot add a tremendous amount of value to the instructional experience. 2 ways that can be really helpful during instruction is by using nonverbal interventions for scholars that are distracted or off track. As an authority figure in the classroom, your presence makes a difference. If you notice a scholar is not paying attention, hovering in their area usually sends the signal that they are distracted and need to be reoriented to get themselves back on track. If they're not in an easy to get to area or getting to them would mean distracting and blocking other scholars, then move around to make eye contact with them and use hand gestures to get them to pay attention to the lesson. Catching off-task behavior early helps with content retention for that individual scholar and makes them less likely to throw off their classmates. Another minimally invasive correction technique is private individual correction. This is where you go directly to a scholar who is disrupting the lesson or needs some words of encouragement because hovering in their area or making eye contact didn't work. Depending on their age, you could put a small sticky note on their desk with a reminder to pay attention, or go by their desk, get down to their level, and whisper what you're noticing about their behavior and how to correct it. The second one is reteaching. It's a beautiful thing when everyone in the classroom is in sync and just gets it after the teacher has gone through the explicit instruction portion of the lesson. The reality is we all learn at different paces and have different learning preferences. Reteaching involves paying close attention to the lesson and then identifying scholars who did not initially grasp the content and need to hear it again at a different pace, or need you to try a different approach altogether for them to understand it. That could be in a different language. It could be using more visuals, introducing manipulatives, having a peer explain it in their own words, or some other creative way. The third one is by preparing to give feedback. We all have blind spots or areas we cannot see. This is especially true if the lead educator has their back to the classroom at any point in the lesson. As educators, we love to teach and we love to learn. Having an extra set of hands and eyes in the classroom means someone can tell us how our lesson may have come across to the scholars. Make note of areas in the lesson where the class may have been lost. moments that really engage the scholars so that they can also be repeated, and any insight on individual scholars that can help tailor future lessons. There you have it. 3 ways you can have a big impact in the classroom without leading instruction. If you ever step foot into a classroom and you don't receive immediate instruction on what to do, you can use the nonverbal forms of correction, take notes to prepare to reteach, and provide some feedback to the lead educator at the end of the lesson. Let's put these into practice with an example. Picture a classroom with 30 scholars. You just walked into the room and you're supporting a lead teacher who is just about to start their lesson. Immediately, move into a position in the back or middle of the room where you can observe a majority of the scholars. Then zone into the lesson. Within a couple of minutes, you notice a scholar who is staring up at the ceiling. This is your opportunity to hover in their direction, which helps redirect their attention to the lead educator. Then, the educator moves into an opportunity for the scholars to work in small groups. If there's no immediate instruction on what to do, visit the small groups and check for understanding of the lesson. Can scholars tell you what they just learned? If not, this is where you can begin to reteach. Repeat until you receive different directions, the class ends, or explicit instruction restarts. At the end of the lesson, share any highlights from the lesson with the lead educator. If you notice anything that should be improved, you should share that as well for the lead teacher to tailor future instruction. Since it's your first session, try to lean more into the positives than the areas for growth. Applying minimally invasive techniques for correction, reteaching, and sharing feedback creates additional personalization for scholars to boost their academic performance.